Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of IREC. At the outset, sorry, we have quorum, I assume. Looks like it. All righty. Can I have
yes, we have quorum. Yes.
All right. Everybody, the agenda was pre-circulated. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Chris?
Thank you. Steve, I'll ask you. Second it.
Okay.
Take that as approved.
Yeah.
We have any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none, I will move on. So we have the consent agenda. The draft minutes of the open IREC session of January the 27th. They were pre-circulated. I don't know whether, I'm assuming we can take them as read. Can I have a motion, please, to approve those? Any comments? Chris and Steve, thank you. Take that one as passed. I've got the minutes of the February 23rd meeting. Take them as read. Chris, Steve?
Yes, thank you.
Those are approved. Thank you. All righty, and then Meg, you've given us the development dashboard. Again, it was pre-circulated. Are there any things in particular you'd like to draw to our attention, or?
I don't think so. This is Leslie's dashboard. Leslie, do you need to point anything out, or Jack, if there are questions, we can answer them as well.
No, I don't think there's anything to point out, and we're having the AHT presentation shortly.
Right. Okay, so we can take the development dashboard as read, and we'll take it in for information. All righty. We're at the development project. We have the AHT project, and this is Leslie and
Jack, if it's okay, could I just make one statement before Leslie introduces the AHT presentation?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge it's been a year. Sorry, I'll put my camera on as well. It's been a year since we started working in this environment remotely. And I just wanted to say to staff, to my staff, and to the board and committee members as well, just we have not missed a beat. And I attribute that to the organization and the cooperation of the board members and the staff. And I just think we've done a great job to survive through this year, and actually very impressed with the amount of work that has gotten through and the support that the board has given us. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Hear, hear. I think congratulations comes from the board members too. You've made it quite tenable to continue working and to continue to get everything done that we have. So thank you as well from us. Okay, thank you. Now we can go on to the AHT process, AHT report.
Just before I start, sorry, Jack, I should have mentioned, and I think Patrick's just called attention to it. We had just put the status column in the development dashboard. So I just want to thank Patrick for that. It was a great addition for us. I'm just going to introduce Michael Wolff, who's moving over to our team from Christina's team. We're doing a swap, and we're really excited to have Michael on board. He's been working with us for since last year on various projects and is taking on some more on the development team. And so he's going to introduce the Anishinaabe project, which we're very excited about and is imminent. We'll be starting soon. So Michael?
Thanks, Leslie, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to give just a brief overview of Block 10, the West Don Lands, which is the Anishinaabe Health Toronto Indigenous Hub. Next slide. So just to give a bit of site context, as you can see from this map, the project is bordered by Front to the north, Mill Street to the south, and then Cherry and Cooperage to the west and east, respectively. Next slide. And just another image to give a bit more context of the surrounding buildings. This also shows the heritage building that's on site and will be both preserved and incorporated into the project. So just to give a bit of background on the project, the site was conveyed to AHT by the province in 2014. And I think this is going to be a really exciting project for the West Donlands, both because it's a really interesting design through the project, but also there's a number of really great uses that are going to be brought to the area. So on the site, there's going to be the health center, which will be owned and operated by AHT, but there also will be a Indigenous training, education, and employment center called the TEAC. There's the heritage building on site that I mentioned, which will be incorporated into the ground floor of a condo building on the site, as well as a market rental building. And for these, AHT has partnered with Dream Kilmer to deliver the condo and the retail and the heritage building, and they partnered with Dream Kilmer and Tricon for the residential rental. The project recently, just in October, completed the DRP, the design review panel, with full support. And as an exciting milestone next week, they'll be officially transferring ownership of the condo lands and the condo lands to Dream Kilmer. They'll be leasing the retail and the heritage building to Dream Kilmer and leasing the rental building lands to Dream Kilmer Tricon. Next slide. So our role, I think this is a slide that most of you have probably seen before, but it's our role as master developer. We've signed development agreements with AHT and Dream Kilmer to ensure that a number of obligations that help achieve our policy objectives are upheld. So some of these are completing the full design review panel process, receiving consent from Waterfront Toronto before proceeding with design development construction, as well as municipal approvals, and also participating both in our Waterfront Toronto Employment Initiative, as well as the Intelligent Community Initiative, which is how we deliver our digital inclusion program. Next slide, please. So here's just kind of a rendering of the project to show where each of the components are. The orange building is the health center. Beside that, the brownish building is the Training, Employment, and Education Center. And then the yellow is the condo and retail. So the condos along Front Street in Cooperage and the condo and rental. So the condos along Front and Cooperage, and the rental is along Cooperage and Mill Street. Next slide, please. And just another plan to give a bit more detail on the components. From here, you can kind of see a little bit better as well where the retail is. It's in orange along Front. So again, within that heritage building will be retail, and also the base of the condo at the corner of Front and Cooperage. Next slide, please. Yeah. And now I just want to talk briefly about the health center and the TEAC. So here's a rendering on the left of the health center. It's very deliberately designed to be kind of the central point of the project, with these kind of curved lines along the building. And then on the right is just a plan of the ground floor. Next slide, please. And here's both on the left is kind of a plan of what there'll be this raised landscape that comes out of the back of the second floor of the health center, kind of operated as a bit of an urban oasis. And then on the right is this kind of lowered courtyard, which will be used for sweat lodge ceremony. Next slide, please. Great. So the TEAC, the Training, Education, and Employment Center, is, as you can see, here's a rendering of the 4-story building on the left. And then on the right, you can kind of see in a little more detail how the building kind of meets the public realm, as well as how it meets this small plaza that is between the TEAC and the heritage building. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a coming slide, but this picture depicts, oh, sorry, go back, yeah, thanks. This picture depicts quite well one of the Indigenous design elements used in the project, which is, as you can see, these kind of precast concrete pillars along the building are, the detailing is supposed to resemble birch trees, and those pillars are around the podiums of most of the project. Next slide. Great. So here's just the floor plans for the TEAC. So the first floor is the Mizubeek Training Center, and then the second floor will be a childcare center. The third will have an early on family center, and the fourth office space. Next slide, please. Just in terms of anticipated timelines, the city has split the project into 2 phases for approval purposes. So phase A is the health center, and they've just received their notice of approval conditions, and they're rapidly working through those. And their hope is to begin construction in May. And then phase B is the remaining components, and they've submitted their final site plan application, and they hope to begin construction in June or July. And hopefully the project will be complete in kind of mid-2024. Next slide, please. And here's a rendering of the whole project. And you can kind of see how the health center is kind of positioned as a central component of the project. Next slide. Here's another render from the same direction, but a different angle. Gives a little bit better view into how the project kind of meets the street in the public realm. Next slide. And now I just want to kind of briefly talk to some of the Indigenous design elements that are incorporated. I'm not going to really be able to do this justice with the time today, though. So if anyone's interested in understanding this piece in more depth, I'd recommend you either go to the website to the meeting minutes from the October DRP, or we have the video from that posted as well. And there's quite a bit of discussion about all these elements there. So the first one being the towers of the buildings have these light and kind of long lines that are supposed to draw one's gaze upwards towards the sky, representing the connection to the sky. And then you can't see it that well, but the brick on the buildings is done in this pattern that looks like a basket weave. It's a really interesting design. And then along the podiums, as I mentioned before, are these concrete, precast concrete pillars that resemble birch trees representing a connection to the earth. Next slide, please. So the last thing I want to talk about is just this Southwest Plaza that's along Mill and Cherry Street. And this is supposed to be a really interesting kind of public gathering space. And Waterfront Toronto will be procuring a significant piece of public art that will likely be predominantly in this area. Next slide. Here's a rendering of what the plaza will look like, although this is a very early rendering. And you know, once the public art is procured and commissioned, it will probably change some of these elements. And next slide. And then just a bit more information on the public art itself. So as I mentioned, there'll be a major permanent and site-specific Indigenous public art commissioned. We've engaged Ryan Rice, who's an Indigenous public art curator, to collaborate with us, AHT, and the city to define the artworks criteria. But the current vision is to facilitate a gathering space in that plaza. And then just a bit about the procurement process for that. The submissions will be reviewed by an evaluation committee comprised of arts professionals, including an Indigenous artist or knowledge keeper, a representative of AHT, and one local community member. And next slide. And yeah, the last two slides are just additional renderings to give a sense of what the project looks like from the other angle. And yeah, here's one more with looking at the Heritage Building from Front and Cherry Street. And that's it. Thanks, everyone. Any questions?
Thank you, Michael.
No problem.
Any questions?
I did have a quick question, Chair, just on any high-level lessons learned from the process that we can apply elsewhere.
Yeah, for this project, I might defer that to Meg or Leslie, given that I've only been involved for a little bit of time.
Leslie, do you want to start, or I can jump in?
I guess I was just going to say it can be very challenging moving a project forward with this kind of scale and this number of uses. So ultimately, the city wanted to split phase 1 from phase 2, so the community health center from the rest. So I know the DKT was very interested in moving the whole project along together and wanted to keep it intact, but ultimately it just became easier, and the community health center really wanted to move forward. So it's challenging to bring, you know, rental, condos, heritage building, retail, and community health center and an employment center all together. So that would be one thing, Meg.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say this has been a long-term project. 2014 was when AHT was provided the land from the province, and there were a lot of restrictions on the lands when they were transferred, like there was to be no residential, had to all be Indigenous uses, etc. So I think for me, the lesson learned is the perseverance it's taken us, AHT, and the province to work through all of the things that, you know, were required to make this site happen, one of which was to find a way to fund it. And that's why the residential permissions were allowed back in by the province. And just really sticking with it over all the trials and tribulations, figuring out how to fund some sustainability elements, making sure that all the uses that AHT needed to accomplish could get funded. So it really is a testament to a commitment to the project over the years, and all parties kind of had to come to that.
Yeah, Jack, if I could just add to Meg's point, I was at the province when this was going on. I think to Meg's point, there were a lot of probably somewhat challenging restrictions that should have been discussed earlier in the project that took years before everybody realized that they could not be addressed. So I think having those discussions early and being realistic about what could be done was probably extremely important lesson learned coming out of that project.
Good. And do they have all their zoning, and is this thing ready to go?
So they're close. So they have their zoning. The health center is just working through their approval conditions, so they're almost complete those. So there shouldn't be any problem. And as mentioned, they're planning to begin construction in May. So that should be pretty good. And then the rest of it, again, they have their zoning. They're just working through they've submitted their final SPA, and I think it's the third one now. So mostly minor issues. So they're planning to start construction June, July. So
very good. Okay,
Jack, it's Andrew. Could I just jump in with something?
Yes, Andrew, and I see Patrick's got his hand up too.
So mine's more like aesthetic, and this might be silly because I'm out of my depth, but I'll lob it out there anyways. And don't be shy about hurting my feelings if it's dumb. But there's sort of, looking from the slides, there's a sort of a combination of very modern elements in the architecture, and then there's obviously the sort of homage to the Indigenous with some of the other materials, which I think is very cool. But is it clear that the sort of the aesthetic associated with that interplay of those design elements relative to the scale of the project, like, again, odd question, but will that be aesthetically like aligned relative to design outcome? I really haven't seen that sort of interplay of two very disparate design elements. So again, out of my depth, but I thought I'd lob it out there.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in a bit on this, and Chris, and maybe you can complement my comments. This project's gone through the design review panel, and it is a unique project in terms of, Andrew, as you said, trying to weave in modern design and the Indigenous kind of background. And actually, I'll let Chris speak to this, but the designer for this is also the Indigenous individual that we've added to our design review panel. And he has a lot of really good insight, which he shared with the design review panel. But I don't know, Chris, if you want to add.
Yeah, well, so the design team for this is actually designing the whole block together. So it's Quadrangle Architects and Two Row, and Matthew Hickey is the Indigenous designer at Two Row Architects, which is an all Indigenous owned architecture firm. And Matthew's been involved in the whole design of the block. So it may not be showing up so clearly here, but there are in fact Indigenous motifs kind of woven through all of the buildings. So while some of them have a more modern expression and some of them are a more kind of literal Indigenous expression, I think those themes, those motifs actually do tie it all together. And I think the design review panel felt the same way when they looked at it, that there is a kind of cohesiveness here, and that even the health center building itself, while it's got a lot of Indigenous motifs, is also kind of in a modern language. So I think it's actually a pretty comfortably unified project.
Thank you, Chris. Patrick, you got a question?
Yeah, sorry, I typed it in there. I just wondering, with the proposed Corktown station just a few hundred meters away, if that wound up influencing the project site in any way, or if it was just sort of too late in the process. Out of curiosity. Thanks.
Chris, or
well, I guess I would say this project is right on the Cherry Street streetcar line. So I think they're assuming high order transit is serving the site. I'm not sure that the addition of the Ontario line would impact this site particularly. There isn't a station stop for the Ontario line proposed on this block. And the densities here are what were set out in the precinct plan and are consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. So So I think this is being developed to sort of the right level of density for this precinct in the city. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, sorry, I see someone else has their hand up. I can't.
Yeah, that's me, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie. Yeah,
Hi.
please.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I just wanted to say that it was very, one of the primary things for Anishinaabe was to make sure that their health center was right on Cherry Street. So that even though other densities had to kind of shift around a little bit, heights of buildings, that they insisted on having that, they wanted that to be the primary focus of this development. And they also wanted to not have anything above them. So it was they own all the land where they are, and that there aren't condos or rental or anything on top of them. Those were two driving forces in this project.
Great, thank you. All righty, well, appreciate that, Michael and Leslie. Are you guys anything further, or shall we move on?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Cameron, can you give us a, oops. Can you give us an update on yesterday's exciting rollout of?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll do one better. I'll do both the rollouts this weekend, and it's a good reminder. We've had the corporation issued two releases this week. On Monday, we released the Parliament Slip vision and the Marine Use strategy, and yesterday, as Jack mentioned, we released the RFQ for the Quayside development opportunity. And so let me start with Parliament Slip and that announcement on Monday. I think I said this to Wendy. Parliament Slip, from a communications and media relations perspective, has a lot to recommend it, because if you think about when good stories are told and repeated, they tend to have sort of four ingredients to them. The topic starts with people and their problems. So in this case, not enough space for people to enjoy the water. Paints a vivid picture and something that people can get their heads around. And I think the Parliament Slip and the renderings did that. That there were voices of support present, and there were lots for us. And it emphasizes emotion over data. So with that, it was frankly a terrific story to be able to promote from a media relations perspective. So we wrote the materials to appeal to emotions, and we got articles that said things like sunshine and beachy vibes coming to the waterfront, which is exactly what we wanted. We wanted to be visual, and the renderings of the slip appeared in, I'm going to say almost all, but it might be all coverage, all print coverage. We also wanted to demonstrate that the 2020 Marine Use Strategy update that we worked on with our partners would be implemented, that it wouldn't just collect dust on a shelf, and the coverage conveyed that. It conveyed action on the Marine Use Strategy, and there was excitement around that, and we're particularly indebted to Ports Toronto for their supportive quotes. And we also wanted to set the table for the release of the Quayside RFQ, which happened on Wednesday. So by the numbers on the matter of the Parliament Slip release, as of last night, there were 13 articles written on it. Articles continue to trickle in, some from the trades. You might notice in this morning's clippings that the Pool and Spa Marketing magazine filed a piece about the slip. So we'll see this over the course of the next week or so as sort of trade publications with weekly publication dates will be filing stories. So don't be surprised to see those over the course of the week or so. There were 3 broadcast segments and 4 radio clips. The tone was positive throughout. And there was excellent, what we call message pull-through, or that is our key messages about reconnecting the city with the lake, appeared in almost all coverage. The floating restaurant and the lakeside pool drove most of the focus as well. From our own properties, our newsroom on our website experienced over 1,300 page views, which, to put into context, when we had the Portland's Bridge set sail announcement or late last year, there were like 87 views. The Bayside T3 announcement had about 50. So it gives you a sense of magnitude. With respect to the RFQ release yesterday and the ensuing media coverage, as of this morning, by my calculation, there were 8 news articles written for television, and there were 8 news articles written. Traffic on our website, and there were, I think, 4 or 5 television and radio clips. Our chair was on Bloomberg yesterday. Meg was on CP24. Traffic on our website more than doubled, and the RFQ newsroom post had more than 1,000 page views by the end of Wednesday. By way of comparison, some directors may remember the October 31st threshold issues letter that went out, that had about 580 views. So we're doubling the numbers there. We also have what's called Quayside quaysidето.ca, which is a dedicated Quayside website, and that experienced a 60% increase in page views since yesterday. The message pull through here was also very good, with key messages getting picked up across coverage. Things about addressing or closing service gaps, the need for more public spaces, the need for aging in place opportunities, and generally a downplaying of the focus on technology. The excellent headline in the Globe and Mail, for example, Alex Bosovic's article, we couldn't have written a better one, ran with the headline, "New plans for Quayside site prioritize people, not tech. Waterfront Toronto has refreshed its vision after Sidewalk Labs setback, this time focusing on affordable housing public architecture." And directors will recall, this is all in service of driving traffic to the RFQ opportunity on Bonfire. And so that possible proponents will be attracted to it and they'll read it. And I know that our colleagues from procurement can report on that activity later on in this meeting. And that's all, Jack. Thanks.
That's great. Steve, Steve, you've got your hand up. Steve Diamond.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So Cameron, the only point is they probably make more press by separating the two. But when I read some of the people's tweets, the one concern I have in trying to turn everything around is connecting what we're doing on the slip with Quayside. Because I found that some people aren't really relating that it's all part and parcel of one package. And when it becomes part and parcel of one package, I think the board and the corporation look even better by turning around Sidewalk to this. And I was a little concerned just from some of the questions Amanda Lang asked. It was like she wasn't connecting what we were doing on the slip with the overall project. So maybe it would have been just too much, but I think we have to concentrate on trying to put this all together, because when you put it all together, it's a fantastic package. And that's the only issue that I have with where we're getting.
And Jack, we'll have a chance in camera to talk a bit more about some of the items. So
great. Anyways, I thought the rollout went well. I saw both Steve's interview and Meg's. I think you guys did great, and I think we're off to a great start on this phase of Quayside. So thank you. Okay, if there's nothing further, then I'd like to have a motion to go into closed session. And so Steve and
Chris.
Happy to second.
Thank you. You can go into closed session. Okay, thank you very much. We're back in open session now. We have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the closed session of this committee on January the 27th and February 23rd as tabled and distributed.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor? Any thank you. Any opposed? I declare that motion carried. Is there any other business today, guys?
no, that'll be it, Jack.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Great meeting.
Thank you very much. The meeting is terminated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Great work. Thanks.
Thank you.